We imagine we launch this product and it bombs. What do we do then? And just by kind of taking people down that journey, they can understand how committed they are to something. And the earlier you do that, the easier it is.
Hi there, Experimentation. Welcome today to this episode where we are going to talk about Speero, how to create an experiment strategy, and a bit about the EXL Meetups that you've probably seen online. This is an interview with my guest today is Paul Randall. He is Associate Director of Strategy at Speero with almost 20 years of experience in the CRO and experimentation scene. My name is Ward van Gestre. I'm one of the new hosts of the Experimentation podcast this year. So this is for me also a new setting. I work normally as a freelance growth consultant through Grow with Ward. But yeah, today we're going to not talk about me, but talk about Paul. Um, let's dive right in. I think, Paul, I saw at the beginning of this year Speero mentioning a bit about their change from CRO to growth or even experimentation led growth. I find it very fascinating as someone who has been saying that growth would be moving more towards experimentation. So, yeah, can you tell me a bit why this happened and yeah, what observations made you guys make this decision?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. And I think that there is and can be a lot of semantics around optimization, experimentation, and when you mention both of those words and differentiate, there can be a lot of kind of heat and debate about it. I think the way that we see it is that CRO is a tool. By its name, it's optimization, optimizing what's there. And by going towards experimentation-led growth, it's talking more about the system and that approach that you can use periodically for a long time that's change beyond the site, cultural change, change within organizations, and changes in thinking. And I think for us, it's been a natural progression from what we've been doing and those prolonged relationships that we've had with clients that builds sort of a stronger and deeper sort of want to do more beyond just a website. So yeah, I think we're very focused at the moment on the system and the machine around it so that then more teams can use that approach within the business.
Yeah. So yeah, you're mentioning system. Can you elaborate a bit on what kind of a system do you mean?
Yeah, so I joined over 5 years ago now, and we were doing everything in terms of project management within Google Sheets. So it was kind of table based. It was 1 month to the next, and there was a lot of management. We would use the tools, like the experimentation tools, to run them, but then the reporting would be done in sort of Google Slides. And like I said, we would use Google Sheet as sort of a task and project management. That works for a period of time, but as you're running tens, hundreds of projects, you want somewhere to be able to look at everything as a repository. And that's where I think our system came in of classifying which type of experiments we're running, kind of iterative, substantial, disruptive, whereabouts they're being run on the page, their output, and how they were generated by what sort of research method. And that system allows you to look back periodically, which we were doing in sort of quarterly reviews, but it's very hands-on process to look back at all the tests that were being run and sort of do this analysis. Whereas now the system that we have built within Airtable kind of just classifies everything just as kind of like a piece of a database. And so we can look at what types of experiments have been winning, what are similar to those, how much research is involved in winning tests versus losing tests, which areas of the site have been most successful, and what types of experiments have led to the most amount of growth in which themes. And I think by doing that, you look beyond just how many tests you're running per month, and you look at what types of activities are working, not working, as a way of driving and seeing what you can do more of and less of. And so that kind of thinking in a systems approach really allows you to elevate beyond, we ran this test, this was the result, to this was the approach that we took, and here's how we're
Yeah.
going to do more of it. So it's been really exciting to see, and honestly, it's easy to forget what it was like before and how reliant we are on it now to have this approach. And I think what's interesting from the last event that we ran, by talking to kind of larger companies like Netflix, they were like, yeah, we don't do this. It's not necessarily the norm, but of course, for us, it's been that way for a very long period of time. So I think this approach of baking in a systems approach to experimentation, or A/B testing and testing in general, is a really great way of providing a really strong message to wider stakeholders on it's more than just kind of tests on a website, a control and a variation. It's an
Yeah.
approach to growth.
My name is Romo Santiago, founder of Experiment Nation. Our new book, Prove It or Lose It, the mostly no-nonsense guide to surviving experimentation program drama, is out now. Find it at experimentnation.com and all major bookstores today.
So is it now? How did the clients react to that change of
Yeah,
positioning, maybe more?
I think they had seen less of it to begin with, as we were doing it for our own purposes and our own benefits. But of course, the ability that they have is also to see what's been working and what's not been working, and to change that thinking process into what can we do to add into this system? What types of research could we be doing more of as well? And it's not just kind of a one way. So what's coming up? It's a generation of ideas from that. And I think the use of that system to look at what's coming up and what we have done has just been transformative in how we run our processes. So we have planning meetings, we have readout meetings, we have collaboration sessions, all with different views, all with different outputs. And yeah, it's really, I think, a way which allows you to have control over what can be quite a messy approach sometimes. In everyone has multiple ideas. It's where we started off with, like, the PXL prioritization. That's one element of it. But just putting sort of order in elements of chaos, or a lot of elements coming in, a lot of input and information. It's trying to make sense of all of that.
Yeah, I think it was also interesting because I think you're also able to touch upon more parts of the business that will influence growth in the long run. I see it as well as like I think if you are talking about growth in a broader perspective, you can also talk about what did we learn on a strategic level uh, on the website, for example, and maybe translate that into other areas. Like I think for what it feels like, I've seen you guys touch upon other parts of the business as well. Like I think even email or other places in a business where you can experiment.
Yeah,
Am I
it's
right?
well, the approach can work everywhere, and we're definitely proponents and advocates of having teams, whether it's teams that are directly reporting to us, or being used by us, or other teams within a client. They might be running email tests, they might be running paid advertising tests in other areas. What we would love is for that to be fed into the machine as well, because realistically, kind of web optimization is not a standalone thing, and what works there as a message test, or a new piece of functionality, can be leveraged in other places. So that's one of the other benefits, and I think our kind of strongest advocates are using it for email, for paid media, for on-site,
Yeah.
and as many areas as they can realistically use testing or measurement in some kind of way to make decisions. So yeah, I think that's the key thing.
Yeah, indeed, right. It brings experimentation to other parts of the business next to just the CRO side. And I think other parts of business, like in marketing, there's also a lot of A/B testing, but it's nowhere near as structured as the CRO community has been. Like that's also where I've said like
Mhm.
road marketing should move a bit more towards experimentation in CRO in terms of just learning from this and like creating a strategy. What do we want to learn? Hypotheses, opportunities, and creating your roadmap from there.
Yeah, I think the willingness to be wrong is something that we probably have a unique perspective on. when we've been talking with kind of other paid media teams, it's a completely alien concept. Of course, their push is on exploitation of what's working and sort of putting as much spend in that as possible. And so the idea of having a hypothesis to test and to prove or disprove something isn't necessarily the same thinking process that they apply. So it's been very interesting to have stakeholders who are fully embedded with the experimentation mindset to then ask paid media teams kind of, what are your hypotheses, what are your testing.
Yeah. Yeah.
um
Indeed.
it's just not a
We're
term that
testing if
that
this works better or not, right? That's the hypothesis. It's a
yeah,
like we don't have anything behind this. It's like if it works better, that's the answer. Yeah.
exactly. So, and I think that's one of the other areas where when they see it working, and aligned to a strategy, it can really show benefits, and it's a trust element, I think, in building trust, and that's a bit we can touch on in a minute as well.
Yeah, no, please go ahead because I'm curious indeed. I think for a lot of people, we everybody starts on a more tactical level, and then we hear people talk about strategy, but it's I think it's hard to grasp for a lot of people. What do you mean with a strategy? What is the why? Why do you create a strategy? And like, yeah, let's start there and then go into how do you create one? Where do you
Yeah,
start?
I think the main thing that we try and work on, and it is one of the differences and where we've been moving towards, is where we would have originally optimized what's there and taken all the historical information, the existing website, the existing pages, the historic analytics information. We would have added on kind of new insights and new research, but it wouldn't be necessarily talking about what the business is trying to strive for in its new year or new quarters. Are they talking about new markets? Are they wanting to go into, tackle their value proposition in a different way? Or are they pivoting their product? And that's where I think we can help. And it moves the conversation from CRO into growth experimentation, because it's about helping them make better bets in certain ways and understanding how to refine that strategy and direction before they commit to it. So if they're wanting to move to a simpler product offering, how can we help them get to that before they decide it internally and then say, by the way, we're launching a new product offering? And we go, oh, okay, great. And then the conversation is, well, now we want you to optimize it. It's sort of turning that around to saying, we want to do this. How can we get there in the quickest and easiest way by making the fewest mistakes? And I think that's where the conversation is about future elements and what can be done, that hasn't been started, which is really exciting, I think. And again, it's a little bit different, where a lot of people from a strategy or strategic perspective want to create a plan, and then it's all about executing it in its
Yeah,
entirety and saying, well, now we're going to grow, 10x, and this is how we're going to do it. When in reality,
exactly.
that really is a bet. And it's about breaking that down into a series of bets that can be measured, of like, well, which part is going to 10x? Is it going to be how you message it, where you message it, all these different kind of things. So it's about de-risking, I guess, change as well, and trying to find a way to adapt quickest in the strongest possible way.
Exactly, exactly. It's when I get asked to create a strategy, I also say like I can we can get this done pretty quickly because I assume that I will be wrong. Like there are so many variables that I assume that I will create the best possible strategy,
Mm-hmm.
and I also assume that it will be wrong. So indeed, let's go ahead and test this. So walk me through it. A client, yeah, maybe a good example. Indeed, they want to launch a new product offering. Where do you start in breaking it down? Feel free to pick a different example, but how do you start to break it down? I've seen some of these flowcharts from your blueprints
Yep.
at Speero. So, but I'm curious, like, where do you start in breaking down such a big bet into more manageable pieces?
I think it starts always by seeing how close you can be to the customer's perspective in certain areas. A lot of times, a company can say, we want to create this, but is there is there a demand? Is there a need? Is there an identified opportunity there? So that's where some existing research can happen, but it changes the type of conversation that you're having to, what might we be able to do, to what is it that you need. And I think that's where a kind of a jobs to be done type conversation can happen, and those type of questions about what would you hire us for, or what are you needing in order to fulfill your potential. That's a good place to start before you're then hearing we want to create a thing. So it leads and is started with ideally a customer need and a desire that then you can just amp up and strengthen. So I think that's the very first thing, is if somebody says this is what we'd like to do, we go, how can we validate this as an opportunity before kind of burning too much energy and time on it, for example. And then it's about understanding what we can do. And this is where kind of growth experimentation is not just an A/B test, but it's about validating ideas as quick as possible. And sometimes that's using a different approach. It might be a prototype, it might be a survey, it might be a false door test to kind of really get there quite quickly. It's not about building something really big and massive and substantial and waiting 6 months and then saying, well, now we're going to 50-50 it. Because realistically, with that much energy and effort put in, even if it comes out unsuccessful or disproven, there will be a desire to want to move it forward. So it's about kind of listening to what the business is wanting to do and what a customer is asking for or needing, and trying to find the quickest and shortest way to doing that, to then build on it and commit further and further. So if it was a new product offering, it's really kind of working out what is it that we need to do in order to communicate it, so that then when we do sort of turn it up with paid spending, more advertising, it already resonates. Because I think one of the other things that we've found is that when people want to go ahead and push something, their plan is already put in place. This is what we're going to do. This is when we're going to launch it.
Yeah.
We're going to amp up the paid spend. We want to create landing pages. And in the worst case scenario, they'll come to us and say, it's not generating the numbers that we need or had
I'll
forecasted.
fix it.
And then you're on the back foot trying to optimize. Instead, they're saying, well, this is what we'd like to do. And then we find ways of kind of getting there as quick as possible with as much understanding, first of all, of what's working, what's not, and then as much trust in terms of where we are making the most impact. So that might be sort of pushing more on paid or
Yeah.
organic or other ways.
Yeah, exactly. I also think indeed it's often like starting with the riskiest assumptions. Indeed, what are the things we deem most likely to fail, and what is most irreversible. So indeed, I mean, if in the end the landing page doesn't convert, but we know everything else is great, then that's fine, right? We can create a new landing page. But indeed, if we created a product for a problem that turns out to not be a real problem, then we can spin the product all we want, but it's gonna be yeah, it's a tougher strategy to correct.
And I think that's where the thought experiment can come in. It can be very easy to understand the direction to go by just kind of creating a hypothetical scenario. So we imagine we launch this product and it bombs. What do we do then? And just by kind of taking people down that journey, they can understand how committed they are to something. And the earlier you do that, the easier it is. I think, back in my world as a designer, when we were doing kind of wireframes, it would be a paper sketch. It would be a low fidelity before you go into high fidelity, before you go into building the product, because it's a lot easier to first create 8 different designs on paper, throw them away, show them in front of people before you then build more and more. And I think it's taking that approach in a sense of product and business as much as possible. But it definitely is not the traditional normal way. And I think
Yeah.
that's where we have built the foundation of trust through optimization, and saying this is how we can use this approach for what we've already got. Here's how we can now take it into things that you're wanting to do. And I think it does take time. It needs to be built up, and it also requires a certain type of business that does have a cultural maturity to allow it to, expect failure, expect losses, but use that as an opportunity to pivot and learn, as opposed to kind of point and blame, or get frustrated over.
Yeah, that's a good one indeed. I think it's also something you can see, like not even just being willing to have an experiment fail, but also having smaller tasks fail. Like indeed, like let's start with a sketch with a of a new design of a wireframe with the same assumption of like a 30% possible win rate. So let's say there's a 70% chance that all the time that you put in this wireframe is also failing, and then yeah, let's start on a lower fidelity indeed, and start from there. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's a nice one. I also like the you mentioned part of showing a new product to the market is also more the messaging. So it's also more coming to uh, include qualitative feedback. I think qualitative learning
Hmm.
next to just the A/B testing. Uh, any I think you guys have this for a long time with the PXL framework, I think, or is it more? No, it's more the research framework, I believe. The DNA string or the virus shaped model. What is it called?
Yeah, that's the research Excel.
Thank you.
But you're right. It's
RXL.
a
Yeah.
it's a combination that is ideally more than 3 points of analysis, 3 points of
Yeah.
research, and we split it up into qualitative and quantitative from a kind of a basic approach. But it will in kind of encompass everything from analytics to research, polls, previous experiments, as a way of painting a picture and kind of creating thematic analysis from that side. And
Yeah.
one of the recent things, I would say, one of the more recent additions has been the copy testing, which through the use of
Yeah.
kind of
Oh
our
yeah.
sister
Winter.
Winter, um, provides some really, really valuable and targeted insights around the messaging, which you could do through a usability study if you're asking the questions in a certain way. But the nice thing about Winter is that it's not talking about how something functions or performs, but just how it resonates. And that's a really key thing, that we've found, and myself personally have found, that the messaging, it is one of the simplest in order to build. I mean, it is just changing of text, so it doesn't require a lot of development resource, which means it's very fast to do. But it is one of the things which is a little bit more politically charged. People have a strong perception on how things are said and everything like that. But it can, from our experiments, be a really big driver for change. And so that's why I'm a big and strong proponent of copy research and copy testing, because it can
Yeah.
make such a difference. I think there's lots of examples out there of kind of taking away some of the branding of kind of key products out there and saying, well, whose headline is this? And it can sometimes be very difficult to know whose is whose.
Yeah.
The key thing for me is making somebody not kind of go, what does this mean? I don't understand,
Yeah.
especially at the moment
Don't
when sort of,
care. Yeah.
AI is added in. They're like, how is that being used and in what way? So,
Yeah.
removing those questions, which I think through a piece of research like Winter, you can get some brutally honest pieces of feedback that the analytics won't tell you, and it won't pick up on. And sometimes the usability won't focus in on so much because people have already moved on to the task. So it's a nice way of just going, just talk about the messaging and nothing else,
Yeah.
which is a
Yeah.
very strong thing to do.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like when you do an A/B test or any sort of like a win flat fail kind of outcome, I think it is way too often indeed, especially right if you're creating a strategy. It's like, let's try out this direction, and then if it turns out that it is a flat or a fail, all you know is that this isn't the right direction. And then it is like, okay, so now what, right? Now we just do our next bet, our next gamble. And I think like having a bit of this qualitative feedback with something like Winter is also much more uh, people give you a bit of a direction. Like, this isn't what I want, but I do like this direction. So it isn't statistical significant, doesn't, but it gives you at least some reason to move forward in a certain different direction, right?
Yeah, and I think that you can accelerate faster to a better outcome and a stronger outcome by doing those types of approaches first. it could be the case that somebody would say, well, let's do a kind of an ABC, have multiple variations, and not really understand kind of the cost behind that sometimes, in a traditional sense where you're just sending, equal amounts of traffic to all of these variations because you haven't been able to make a decision, which is often the case, that, there isn't a strong direction one way or the other. So let's just let the numbers decide. And you can do that. But I think it's also, even if you get an outcome and variant C is the strongest one, you won't really know why. So you're still a little bit in the dark as to what has made the difference. And so trying to understand behind the scenes what is making the biggest impact, resonance, messaging, a particular term that's used or not used, then helps you kind of kick on to the next type of test in using the same theme. So yeah, it's about using a combination of approaches, I think, to get to the outcome as quick as possible.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I personally like to bring a lot of website optimization or product optimization questions more into the ads already. Like if you, because it's so much easier to spin out another ad or show a product in a slightly different way, emphasize a certain feature a bit more, and it really much more allows for like quicker turnaround on because you can just turn up the ad spend and then you have more exposure, therefore getting a much quicker answer as well, right? I think, and it that helps to test a lot of directions a little bit. Yeah. Hey, I wanted to. There's something else that has been blowing up. I think worldwide blowing up is the EXL meetups.
Mm.
Um, it's a what should I call it? It's a new project,
Oh,
side hobby from EXL to uh, yeah, more
yeah.
community led.
So these experiment live meetups was basically just a way for us to have not just a singular event per year. We typically have a large one in Austin with a lot of speakers, but I would say this is kind of Pep Lyle's kind of approach from the winter experiment, from the winter events that he's run in spring, is almost like an unconference. So those were around having speakers, but it was only part of it. So the other 50% was around the networking side. And so we're taking that element of just getting people together to have conversations. It's not about pitches, it's not about presentations, it's just about kind of getting together with no agenda, to talk about the things which we're going on with. So that would happen
So
once a year.
it was basically a little experiment, right, on the
Yeah,
winter side, and then rolled into this bigger EXL
absolutely.
strategy. Yeah, I
Yeah.
like that. It's learning dog food, eating your own dog food. Nice.
Yeah, so we had loads of great feedback from the Austin one, which was the biggest one. But of course, there is the limiting factor that it's location based. So we're a remote, kind of a global remote business. We have lots of people in different areas. So we thought, well, why don't we use our team to self-host these events? So we've had them in kind of London, New York, um,
Remember,
South
yeah,
America. We've had them in the Netherlands. We've had them everywhere. We've got ones coming in Sydney and Dubai,
yeah, yeah.
to
I'm
the
looking
point now.
forward to the one in Amsterdam. Indeed, yeah.
Yeah. So and it's not a thing that we want to sort of own. Anyone can self-host one of
Yeah.
these. It's not about us from a branding perspective. It's really just about bringing the right people together to talk about culture, people, process, and priorities. And I think that's
So
one of
so
the.
I haven't been to one, but it's
Oh,
just like you say there's no agenda. So it's really just you walk in and it's just like you walk into a pub and it's just there are a lot of other people who
yeah.
you recognize from profile pictures, but is there nothing at all or is there any? Tell me.
So we're sort of trying to facilitate conversations. We built these little cards, these little sort of deck of cards with questions of like conversation starters around experimentation, around kind of behavioral things. Realistically, we don't need to use those that much. We've kind of had 30 plus people come and stay for 3 hours. We have some really lovely sponsors. They bring the bar and the drink and the food, but it's just, yeah, it's bringing people together to talk about it. I think what we found, LinkedIn is a great place for conversations. but the conversations stop at a certain point. This is where you can keep going, keep asking, and find people within a wider network who are also going through the same things. So yeah, we're on track to do, I think, 50 plus. And I think there's no kind of stopping really. If we can create this that anyone can host and run them, we'd love to see them pop up everywhere and ultimately get more people within our experimentation world kind of getting together regularly just to talk about things with each other.
Awesome, nice one. I think that's also a nice one to wrap it up. We're almost on half an hour. What are any next EXL meetups that you're joining?
So we've got the second one coming up in London. I know we mentioned the one in Amsterdam as well. I'm very interested. We've got our first one in Australia, in Sydney coming up, and also in Dubai. So very interesting to see how those teams in different areas of the world are dealing with optimization experimentation. I think that's one of the very interesting things.
You'll be joining all of those, or
No, no, I
oh
won't.
no,
Will
yes, sorry.
No, although Ben LeBay, I think, is making it his personal mission as kind of the CEO to join as many as he possibly can. So I think he's going to Frankfurt. He's been to the New York one. Yeah, he's coming to many, many, many of them. So you might have a chance to see him. But at least one of the people from our team will be in one of the events.
Oh, that's fun. Yeah, no, indeed. I'll be at the Amsterdam one and maybe also the Frankfurt one. I believe it's at the same time as Growth Minded Superheroes event. Yeah, no, cool. Really looking forward to it. And thanks a lot. What is the best place for people to reach out to you if they want to talk about uh, anything from experimentation or yeah, we spoke about other hobbies as well, but yeah,
Yeah, I'll be on LinkedIn mostly. You'll be able to find me on Paul Randall, and I'll occasionally be talking about frameworks beyond in my newsletter. But LinkedIn, I would say, is the best place to kind of follow me and keep on tabs with what we're doing at Speero as well.
cool. What's your newsletter about?
It's all about frameworks. It's called Save for Later. So it's kind of a side shoot of thinking in systems and processes. And it kind of was from our Spiro blueprints where we created these as approaches. Yeah, it's kind of a smallish hobby on the side that has only just started, but it's nice to dig into wider frameworks that I like to look into.
Nice. Thanks, Paul. Have a nice day, everybody, and thanks again, Paul.
Thanks very much.
My name is Romo Santiago, founder of Experiment Nation. Our new book, Prove It or Lose It, the mostly no-nonsense guide to surviving experimentation program drama, is out now. Find it at experimentnation.com and all major bookstores today.